Welcome to Surrender School. The Gifts of Imperfection. Session 6.
All right, let's just dive in. Okay, we're going to start on page 63 in the old version, page 84 and page 85 in the new version. So I'm going to look at a couple of definitions here. She starts out by saying, well, first, let me say the third guidepost is cultivating a resilient spirit. Okay, letting go of numbing and powerlessness. She says resilience is the ability to overcome adversity. And protective factors, the things we do, have, and practice that give us bounce, that essentially make us resilient. I can't say anything. Those are definitions, and I think they're very fine definitions of resilience. Second is the top of page 64 in the old and page 85 in the new. She says, 5 of the most common factors of resilient people are: 1, they are resourceful and have good problem-solving skills. 2, they are more likely to seek help. 3, they hold the belief that they can do something that will help them to manage their feelings and to cope. 4, they have social support available to them. And 5, they are connected with others, such as family and friends. This I really see. When I look at this through the program lens, you can really see kind of how program helps us with these 5 things. Resourceful, have good problem-solving skills. I think going through the steps teach us that. I really do. I think going through the steps teach us to do some basic problem-solving skills in our lives, to take a look at things differently than we typically have before. And just the fact that we're in the rooms means that we've already asked for help. We get ourselves a sponsor, and it really means we've asked ourselves for help. So we get good at doing that, making outreach calls, doing 10th step calls. That is very much a program thing. This one is interesting. They hold the belief that they can do something that will help them overall. And there is a tension between powerlessness in program and personal responsibility to do what we need to do in program to work a program. So to me, I see some tension between those two things sometimes in program. I don't know. I'll be interested to see if there's any sharing on that, because the thing that I always have to remember is my powerlessness really is what gives me power in this program. It's what empowers me in this program. It doesn't make me helpless. It empowers me. And that's what she's talking about there, that people feel like they can actually do something to help themselves. 4, they have social support available to them. That's the fellowship, hands down. And 5, they are connected with others, such as family or friends. And we get God Squad circles in this program if we're lucky. We do have to put ourselves out there and be a little vulnerable in order to do that. But if we're lucky, we put together a God Squad for ourselves, or a group of people that we can call if we need to, that we know we can call if we need to, and that won't judge us and that we feel safe with. Okay, so those are the things, kind of the 5 factors of resilience. Next, I want to go over mid-page 64 in the old version and on page 86 in the new version. The stories had more in common than just resilience. All of these stories were about spirit. The very foundation of the protective factors, the things that made them bouncy, the things that made them resilient, was their spirituality. Interesting. Here's how she defines spirituality. Spirituality is recognizing and celebrating that we are all inextricably connected to each other by a power greater than all of us, and that our connection to that power and to one another is grounded in love and compassion. Practicing spirituality brings a sense of perspective, meaning, and purpose to our lives. Without exception, spirituality, the belief in connection, a power greater than ourselves, and interconnections grounded in love and compassion, emerged as a component of resilience. To me, resilience means not relapsing. That's how I put it through 12-step lens. Resilience is my ability to protect myself against relapse. And I think it's really interesting here. The foundation of resilience, she's saying, is spirituality. And, and I'm not talking, and I don't think she's talking about spirituality in a religious sense. I'm talking about spirituality in the sense of growth and blossoming and changing and growing and always moving toward growth with love and compassion. And I think that we really shortchange ourselves in this program when we don't move toward that kind of spirituality and instead focus solely on the food. And I'm not saying the food and food plans and abstinence are not important, because that's not true. But the focus, the real hard work, is in the spirituality, because that's what gives us our resilience against this disease. That's what helps us cope with life and gives us resilience against the power of this disease. At least that's the way I see it. Okay, the next thing I want to look at is top of page 65 in the old and the top of page 87 in the new. The one thing that they all had in common was spirituality as the foundation of their resilience. From this foundation of spirituality, 3 other significant patterns emerged as being essential to resilience. 1, cultivating hope. 2, practicing critical awareness. Now that's interesting. And 3, letting go of numbing and taking the edge off vulnerability, discomfort, and pain. Okay, so, overall, I have used program literature, I have used my relationships with other people, and I have used other outside spiritual literature or other outside recovery literature to help me kind of cultivate these things. But I will tell you that it was the spirituality that allowed me to let go of the numbing. I don't know if this is going to sound right. It's not that my spirituality took the place of food for numbing. That's not what I'm talking about here. It's more that spirituality gave me something to hold on to that allowed me to not have to numb. Okay. It's different. It didn't take the place of it, but it gave me something to hold on to while I experimented with allowing myself to be vulnerable and to do reality. Okay, next I want to look at further down on page 65 and at the bottom of page 87. I was shocked to discover that hope is not an emotion. It's a way of thinking or a cognitive process. Emotions play a supporting role, but hope is really a thought process. So hope is a combination of setting goals, having the tenacity and perseverance to pursue them, and believing in our own abilities. Now, this is a very different definition of hope for me. This is a very active process. This isn't a passive process. It's a verb. Hope becomes a verb. It's things we do that give us hope. I love that, because I hate having to sit around and wait for somebody else or something magical or my fairy godmother or somebody to do something for me. I am much happier, contented, not as afraid if I have things to do, if I have actions I can take. So this to me was good news. I liked this. I liked her kind of take on the whole thing around hope. Okay, so next, it's the very next paragraph. She says, hope is learned. It's not a crapshoot. It's a conscious choice. I like being empowered, particularly after I get done admitting my powerlessness over food. I like to be empowered. That really helped me. I was reassured by the fact that hope can be learned and that it's a choice, and that if I practice it, it will get stronger. I will feel like there are more things I can do to help myself, help my situation, help whatever, that I have the ability to do that. Belief in myself, I guess. Next is just the next paragraph. It's going to be page about a third of the way down on 66, or bottom of page 88 into 89. I found in my research that men and women who self-support as hopeful put considerable value on persistence and hard work. The new cultural belief that everything should be fun, fast, and easy is inconsistent with hopeful thinking. It also sets us up for hopelessness. A little bit further down, she says, I've also learned that never fun, fast, and easy is as detrimental to hope as always fun, fast, and easy. If we want to cultivate hopefulness, we have to be willing to be flexible and demonstrate perseverance. Not every goal will look and feel the same. Tolerance for disappointment, determination, and a belief in self are the heart of hope. To me, that's, I always say I don't have an expectation that abstinence and maintenance and following a food plan will be easy or comfortable. I have no expectation of that. But I also believe that I get better and better and better at it. I'm hopeful that I get better and better and better at it over time. And so far that has been true. That's not to say I haven't failed. That's where the hard work and persistence and perseverance come in. I don't have any expectation that I'm not going to fail or that I should be perfect at any of this. I don't have that expectation. So then if I do fail, it's not an excuse to give up. It means nothing. It's just part of the process, and I go on. Okay, then she talks about on the top of page 67, bottom 89, top of 90 for the new edition. Entitlement is, I deserve this just because I want it. And agency is, I know I can do this. The combination of fear of disappointment, entitlement, and performance pressure is a recipe for hopelessness and self-doubt. And I can honestly say that is how I felt, after 25 years in program, not being able to get abstinent, not being able to lose weight, and not being able to get into recovery. I mean, until I let it go ahead and be difficult and sometimes uncomfortable, I couldn't succeed, because every time I ran into discomfort, it was a failure for me. Okay, same thing. She goes on to say, hopelessness is dangerous because it leads to feelings of powerlessness. The best definition of power comes from Martin Luther King Jr. He described power as the ability to effect change. How do you feel when you believe that you are powerless to change something in your life? These concepts were very important to me in my recovery. Powerlessness is my touchstone. Powerlessness over food, over certain alcoholic foods, is my touchstone. It is my anchor. It is the place I begin in this program. But powerlessness everywhere else in my life is just a recipe for sitting in the corner and sucking my thumb. I have to feel like I have the ability to affect change. I have to feel like I have the ability to recover. I have to feel like I have the ability to work these steps. I have the ability to withstand the discomfort of abstinence and following a food plan. My powerlessness doesn't extend to that. My powerlessness is over my alcoholic foods. Okay, and then let's see. Then down mid-page 67 and on mid-page 90 for the new edition, she says, practicing, I really like this, practicing critical awareness is about reality checking the messages and expectations that drive the never good enough gremlins. And the way that I think about that, that is, all the expectations I had around following a food plan perfectly, about always eating, 10 green beans and not 11 green beans. And, just the insanity of those kinds of expectations. If I bring critical awareness, if I bring critical thinking, reality checking, she calls it, how realistic is it that I will always perfectly, without fail, regardless of whether I'm on vacation or at a restaurant or trying to use up the green beans before they go bad, that I will always have exactly 6.0 ounces of green beans. Okay, that stuff drives me crazy. Do I try and have 6 ounces of green beans? Why, yes, I do. But oops, sorry. But I don't have an expectation of perfection there. The only place I need to do that is with my alcoholic foods, because then I'm powerless. So it makes a big difference to me where I put that, understanding those motivations and expectations behind what I'm doing and how I'm thinking about things. So I loved that she put that in there in the section on like hope. I think that's awesome, because otherwise, if I have to be perfect, I am hopeless in this program, because I will fail every single time. I mean, I will eventually go out to a restaurant for lunch, and there's no way I can ensure that I have 4 ounces of tofu, it might be 6 ounces, but it's not, carrot cake or, chocolate molten lava cake or whatever. It's not that. That's the only thing I have to be perfect at. So I think being able to look honestly and reality check our expectations is really important in hope. Okay, then she talks about at the very last sentence on page 67 or the top of page 91. If we want to cultivate a resilient spirit and stop falling prey to comparing our ordinary lives with manufactured images, we need to see how to reality check what we see. We need to be able to ask and answer these questions. Is what I'm seeing real? Do these images convey real life or fantasy? And anything you see on the internet is fantasy. I mean, bottom line, end of story. That's it. It's just fantasy. The second thing is, do these images reflect healthy, wholehearted living, or do they turn my life, my body, my family, and my relationships into objects and commodities? Now, I know what she's talking about here, but when I look at it through a recovery lens, is the recovery that person is claiming, that person who lost weight, is that really healthy? Is it really healthy recovery, or is it stark raving abstinence, right? Swinging from the chandelier abstinence, okay? Or is it healthy recovery? Really healthy recovery that you are attracted to and you would want what they have? I think we need to fact check that. Next one is, who benefits by my seeing these images and feeling bad about myself? Hint, this is always about money and or control. And if I'm looking again through a program lens, when you're working with a sponsor and they have expectations of perfection for you, and they are doing shaming around a slip or something like that, then who's benefiting from this projection of perfection that they're giving you? It ain't you, it's them. Okay, whether it's a control issue or a superiority issue or whatever. Sponsor-sponsee relationships are relationships of equality. They are not hierarchical. Okay, and it's really important to remember that. Okay, next, third of the way down on page 69 or on the top of page 92. As I mentioned earlier, practicing spirituality brings perspective, meaning, and purpose to our lives. When we allow ourselves to become culturally conditioned to believe that we are not enough and that we don't make enough or have enough, it damages our soul. This is why I think practicing critical awareness and reality checking is as much about spirituality as it is about critical thinking. I really like that. The whole equating critical awareness and critical thinking with spirituality is brilliant. I mean, equating those two things is absolutely brilliant. On the toward 2/3 down on page 69 or on the bottom of 92, when I interviewed the participants whom I describe as living a wholehearted life about the same topic, they consistently talked about trying to feel the feelings, staying mindful about numbing behaviors, and trying to lean into the discomfort of hard emotions. My program is all about not running away from discomfort, and it can be really hard sometimes. Sometimes I do sit in a corner and suck my thumb, but most of the time I'm trying to lean into the discomfort so I can learn about it, figure out what it's about. How can I apply program to it? How can I apply my own version or brand of spirituality to this discomfort? She says, next paragraph, I knew this was a critically important finding in my research. So I spent several hundred interviews trying to better understand the consequences of numbing and how taking the edge off behaviors is related to addiction. Here is what I learned. 1, most of us engage in behaviors, consciously or not, that help us to numb and take the edge off vulnerability, pain, and discomfort. 2, addiction can be described as chronically and compulsively numbing and taking the edge off of feelings. And 3, we cannot selectively numb emotions. When we numb the painful emotions, we numb the positive emotions. So I see where she's saying, numbing and taking the edge off are like national pastimes. And I think it's true in our culture. If you look at our culture, I think that that's true. But as an addict, I'm a professional level number. I have it down to a science. I can, if you were to slow down like in slow-mo, if I'm in an uncomfortable situation, I can move to the food, like the first little tinge of food thought will come, even before I'm really totally aware that I'm uncomfortable. I mean, it can even move that quickly for me. I am a professional. Those people out there in the world that are doing all that numbing stuff, yeah, they do it, but they're amateurs. I'm a professional. Then the next paragraph, a third of the way down on 70 and mid-page 93. The most powerful emotions that we experience have very sharp points, like the tip of a thorn. For many of us, our first response to vulnerability and pain of these sharp points is not to lean into the discomfort and feel our way through, but rather to make it go away. We do that by numbing and taking the edge off the pain with whatever provides the quickest relief. I mean, and food worked great for me as a numbing agent. It always worked and it never let me down. And it replaced, this is what I really think it really did for me, is it replaced whatever real life pain I was feeling or discomfort I was feeling. And it switched it over to the pain of knowing that I had just binged, which was an enormously familiar pain for me. I mean, I'd been doing it my whole life. I knew that pain inside and out. So it got me away from a more unfamiliar pain and led me into a much more comfortable place of a known quantity pain. The pain that I had just binged and I had just failed again and I had just done it again. On mid-page 70 and then the top of page 94, before conducting this research, I thought that numbing and taking the edge off was just about addiction. But I don't believe that anymore. Now I believe that everyone numbs and takes the edge off, and that addiction is about engaging in these behaviors compulsively and chronically. I don't know what else there is to say about that. That is in a nutshell, our story, or at least it's my story. Bottom of page 70 or mid-page 94. I definitely believe that genetics and neurobiology can play a critical role in addiction. But I also believe that there are countless people out there struggling with numbing and taking the edge off because the disease model of addiction doesn't fit their experiences as closely as a model that takes numbing processes into consideration. Not everyone's addiction is the same. And to me, this is a really interesting idea. I mean, and maybe during our sharing time, we can talk about this. What was your reaction to her saying this? I'm gonna go into the next thing and we'll tie these two things together. It's a third of the way down on page 71 and the bottom of page 94. My confusion stemmed from the fact that I never felt completely in sync with the recovery community. Then a few paragraphs down, I've spent most of my life trying to outrun vulnerability and uncertainty. I wasn't raised with the skills and emotional practices needed to lean into discomfort. So over time, I basically became a take the edge off-aholic, but they don't have meetings for that. And after some brief experimenting, I learned that describing your addiction that way in a meeting doesn't always go over very well with the purists. And I think we see that all the time whenever you come up with any kind of, there's always purists and that's okay. They can be purists, but it's not fair to shush other people just because it doesn't agree with you. But I've heard addiction talked about. I think this is Rami Shapiro's hypothesis is that addiction at its very, very core, very, very essence is our addiction to control. And then he broadens it out for like a step 3 perspective of addiction to playing God. But it's that whole addiction to control. And here it's about, take the edge off is when you need to take the edge off, it's because you're resisting what is. We are resisting what is happening. We are resisting some truth that is happening in our reality in this moment. And that's why we need to take the edge off, because it's uncomfortable in some way. So I think, Rami Shapiro's whole thing fits really beautifully with this. And it has been true in my own process of recovery is addiction to control is really enticing. And I think some people take that and they try and apply it to their food plan. They try and apply it to the food, and they think mistakenly that if they can control their food in some way, then they'll be able to control everything else that's going on in their life. But at the core, it's a problem with letting go of control and just being comfortable with what is. Okay, then down further, mid-page 72 or mid-page 96 for the new edition. And to me, this is like a diagnostic paragraph. So I wrote in, again, after years of research, I'm convinced that we all numb and take the edge off. The question is, does our eating get in the way of our authenticity? Does it stop us from being emotionally honest and setting boundaries and feeling like we're enough? Does it keep us from staying out of judgment and from feeling connected? Are we using food to hide or escape from the reality of our lives? To me, that's a perfect diagnostic question. When you first get a sponsee, go ahead and ask them that question, because that is a great diagnostic right there. Next paragraph. Understanding my behaviors and feelings through a vulnerability lens rather than strictly through an addiction lens changed my entire life. It also strengthened my commitment to sobriety, abstinence, health, and spirituality. And I think that's why there is a need for some kind of power greater than yourself in this program, because it helps me with that feeling of vulnerability. And whether you choose, like when I first got into a program, my higher power was essentially, and it's mixed in there now for me, but it's the physical laws of the planet. The way the planet works was my higher power, because every time I fought that, I lost. I mean, every time. I mean, there was no way I could fight gravity. There was no way I could fight my physiology and my biology that made me into a food addict. So that was my beginnings of spirituality in this program. And I could rely on that power greater than me 100%. It was magical because it helped me with my feelings of vulnerability in this program, because I knew I could depend on it. I wasn't expecting myself to magically make reality what it wasn't. And I wasn't expecting any other kind of power to make reality what it wasn't. So it was very reassuring to me. And it was a beautiful starting point for me as someone who was, pretty much, agnostic / borderline atheist agnostic. And it was an entryway. And then I saw all the beauty of the way and the magical way that the natural laws on this planet work. I mean, it just because you can explain it doesn't mean it's not magical. And so it was really a beautiful opening for me to a different kind of spirituality. And that was TMI. Okay, next thing. Very bottom of page 72, top of page 97. She says, my research also taught me that there's no such thing as selective emotional numbing. There is a full spectrum of human emotions, and when we numb the dark, we numb the light. While I was taking the edge off of the pain and vulnerability, I was also unintentionally dulling my experiences of good feelings like joy. The way that showed up for me was that I never wanted to let myself get excited about something good that might be happening, because it was like waiting for the other shoe to drop, or waiting for, when you're a little kid and you're really excited and you're like this and you're being really loud, and some adult says, shh, be quiet, stop that. And it's a cutting you off at your knees for that kind of excitement. And I didn't want the cutting off of the knees. So I actually welcomed, with the numbing of the bad, the numbing of the good. I mean, that's how neurotic I am in my disease, is that I would rather feel miserable than feel good and have it taken away from me. Let's see. A third of the way down on page 73 or mid page 97. Joy is as thorny and sharp as any of the dark emotions. To love someone fiercely, to believe in something with your whole heart, to celebrate a fleeting moment in time, to fully engage in a life that doesn't come with guarantees. These are risks that involve vulnerability and often pain. When we lose our tolerance for discomfort, we lose joy. In fact, addiction research shows us that an intensely positive experience is as likely to cause relapse as an intensely painful experience. I think that's really important to understand. It has been in my own, any emotion is a relapse risk for me. If I'm not working my program, it can blow me over very easily. And I lose my emotional center of gravity and I'm off and running. Bottom of page 73 or mid page 98. She says, is spirituality a necessary component for resilience? The answer is yes. Feelings of hopelessness, fear, blame, pain, discomfort, vulnerability, and disconnection sabotage resilience. The only experience that seems broad and fierce enough to combat a list like that is the belief that we're all in this together and that something greater than us has the capacity to bring love and compassion into our lives. Notice she didn't say fix everything and make everything easy. She didn't say that. But I loved that phrase, broad and fierce enough. I really like that. Top of page 74, bottom of page 98, we all have to define spirituality in a way that inspires us. And that's my little soapbox, and I won't get on it now, but I really have a very strong belief that yes, spirituality is required, but that spirituality doesn't have to look like anybody else's, doesn't have to include anything metaphysical, or it can. It doesn't have to include religion in any way, or it can, but it has to work for you, period. End of soapbox. Okay. And then I liked her little dig deep exercise, the vowel check, A-E-I-O-U-Y. Bottom of page 74 or page 99. A, have I been abstinent today? E, have I exercised today? I, what have I done for myself today? What have I done for others today? And you, am I holding on to unexpressed emotions today? Or and I would add unexpressed expectations. And then why, yay, what is something good that happened today? So that was her third guidepost. And then we're going to jump into I have a little bit of time here. I'm going to jump into the fourth guidepost, cultivating gratitude and joy. Bottom of page 77 or the top of page 102. One of the most profound changes in my life happened when I got my head around the relationship between gratitude and joy. I always thought that joyful people were grateful people. I mean, why wouldn't they be? They have all of that goodness to be grateful for. But after spending countless hours collecting stories about joy and gratitude, three powerful patterns emerged. One, without exception, every person I interviewed who described living a joyful life or who described themselves as joyful actively, here's the important part, practiced gratitude, and attributed their joyfulness to their gratitude practice. 2, both joy and gratitude were described as spiritual practices. Again, important phrase, spiritual practices that were bound to a belief in human interconnectedness and a power greater than us. And 3, people were quick to point out the differences between happiness and joy as the difference between a human emotion that's connected to circumstances and a spiritual way of engaging with the world that's connected to practicing gratitude. That's a huge, huge difference. The spiritual nature of joy and the action-oriented nature of gratitude. But that's the way she differentiates those two. So next paragraph, gratitude. When it comes to gratitude, the word that jumped out at me throughout this research process is practice. It's that P word. I don't necessarily think another researcher would have been so taken aback, but as someone who thought that knowledge was more important than practice, I found these words to be a call to action. For me, action is more important than thinking, because I am really good at thinking. I mean, if I could have thought myself thin, it would have been over a long time ago. But that's not the way that it worked for me. Next is the very next paragraph, mid-page 78 or the top of page 103. Having an attitude doesn't always translate to behavior. I mean, it's that old AA adage about, are you talking the talk or walking the walk? You know, we can say we're in recovery, but are we acting like we're in recovery? We can say love and tolerance is our code, but are we acting like that's our code? For me, it's almost like an integrity with my own values. Next paragraph. For years, oh wait, no, I'm sorry. Bottom of page 78 or the bottom of page 103. So what does a gratitude practice look like? The folks I interviewed talked about keeping gratitude journals, doing daily gratitude meditations or prayers, creating gratitude art. I absolutely love that and never would have thought of that in a million years. And even stopping during their stressful, busy days to actually say these words out loud. I am grateful for. When the wholehearted talk about gratitude, there are a whole bunch of verbs involved. It seems that gratitude without practice may be a little like faith without works. It's not alive. I've never done a gratitude journal, but when I get in bed to do my, I do my step 11 verbally with my higher power, the end of the day practice. And I get into bed and I make a connection and I talk over my day and I look at what I could have done better. And then I say what I'm grateful for. Like I'm, really grateful I didn't break my toe when I stubbed it. I'm really grateful that I had enough fruit for my dinner. I'm, the simple act, I'm really grateful for the dozens, if not hundreds of people it took to put food on my plate today. That level of gratitude, to me, that's a spiritual practice of knowing that I am connected to everyone else that way. Just the simple act of sitting down and eating my veggies. I am connected to many, many people through that. And to me, that feels very spiritually nourishing. Next thing, middle of page 79 in the old or the top of page 104 in the new. The research has taught me that happiness and joy are different experiences. Here's the difference. Happiness is tied to circumstance, and joyfulness is tied to spirit and gratitude. And when you look at it like that, those are very different things. I really have no control over circumstance, but I have a lot more control over my spirituality and my gratitude and my attitude of gratitude, my actions of gratitude. Next paragraph. I also learned that neither joy nor happiness is constant. No one feels happy all the time or joyful all the time. Both experiences come and go. Happiness is attached to external situations and events and seems to ebb and flow as those circumstances come and go. And joy seems to be constantly tethered to our hearts by spirit and gratitude. And I like the ebb and flow. I think it's really important. If I have an expectation that I'm going to come into recovery and everything is going to be binky, I'm going to be sorely disappointed. If I think I'm going to come into recovery, lose all my weight, and everything's all of a sudden going to be easy for me like I always thought it would be, I'm going to be severely disappointed. So I think the ebb and flow is really important. It's life, it's reality. It's how the ebb and flow of reality works. And accepting it seems to be our ticket. Bottom of page 79 or the bottom of page 104. Ann Robertson, a Methodist pastor, writer, and executive director of the Massachusetts Bible Society, explains how the Greek origins of the word happiness and joy hold important meaning for us today. She explains that the Greek word for happiness is makarios, which is, pardon me if I'm butchering that, which was used to describe the freedom of the rich from normal cares and worries, or to describe a person who received some form of good fortune, such as money or health. Robertson compares this to the Greek word for joy, which is chero. Chero was described by the ancient Greeks as the culmination of being and the good mood of the soul. Oh God, I love that. Good mood of the soul. I think I need to get that tattooed. Robertson writes, chero is something the ancient Greeks tell us that is found only in God and comes with virtue and wisdom. It isn't a beginner's virtue. It comes as the culmination. They say its opposite is not sadness, but fear. I love that. The opposite of joy is fear. Brilliant. I really like that. Next, top of page 81 or mid page 106. I believe a joyful life is made up of joyful moments gracefully strung together by trust, gratitude, inspiration, and faith. That's just beautiful, period. I thought it was very lyrical. Okay, and then I liked her TGIF, this gratitude practice of TGIF. You know, she used to put it in a weekly post, but you could even journal it weekly. What I'm trusting, what I'm grateful for, what inspires me, and how I'm practicing my faith. TGIF. I liked that as a really cute exercise. Next paragraph. Joy and gratitude can be very vulnerable and intense experiences. We are an anxious people, and many of us have very little tolerance for vulnerability. Our anxiety and fear can manifest as scarcity. We think to ourselves, I'm not going to allow myself to feel this joy because I know it won't last. Acknowledging how grateful I am is an invitation for disaster. I'd rather not be joyful than have to wait for the other shoe to drop. And that's what I was talking about before, that, you have to be aware and start learning to watch your own self-talk in this program. Because I got so used to my own negative self-talk telling me I couldn't, telling me I would fail, telling me I'd never be able to recover, telling me I couldn't get from lunch to dinner abstinently. I started to believe that stuff. And again, that's her critical awareness, her reality checking. I like that. That to me is the answer to all of that kind of, what do they call it? The itty bitty shitty committee, or that kind of thing, stinking thinking, those kinds of things. Okay, bottom of page 81 and mid page 107, very bottom of page 81. I realized that my too good to be true was totally related to fear, scarcity, and vulnerability. Amen, sister, because that is what it was absolutely connected to for me, the too good to be true. Then on mid page 82 or mid page 108, most of us have experienced being on the edge of joy only to be overcome by vulnerability and thrown into fear. Until we can tolerate vulnerability and transform it into gratitude, intense feelings of love will often bring up the fear of loss. If I had to sum up what I've learned about fear and joy, this is what I would say. The dark does not destroy the light, it defines it. It's our fear of the dark that casts our joy into the shadows. Living in abstinence to me is a really high level course in teaching me how to live with vulnerability. To dare to allow myself to feel joy. It lets me do that. It lets me dare to do some of this stuff. I mean, as a compulsive overeater, food addict, throw me your worst. I have lived from lunch to dinner today abstinently. And if I can do that, I can freaking do anything. And some days I feel like that. Go ahead, throw your worst at me, man. I made it past 3:30 this afternoon. So I like that notion. Okay, next she starts talking about scarcity, bottom of page 82, top of page 109. What I'm describing above is scarcity and uncertainty, but there are other kinds of scarcity. That's interesting because I had a bottom line safety issue for me. So my scarcity was often just around a plain old scarcity issue. But she goes on to explain it. Next page, middle of page 83 or the bottom of page 109. Before we even sit up in bed, before our feet touch the floor, we're already inadequate, already behind, already losing, already lacking something. And by the time we go to bed at night, our minds race with a litany of what we didn't get or didn't get done that day. What begins as a simple expression of the hurried life or even the challenged life grows into the great justification for an unfilled life. Justification allowed me not to try recovery over and over and over and over again. Justification led me back into relapse over and over and over again. That justification so I can give up. And, to me, what she's saying here is that's kind of normal. It's how we've translated our lives into being rushed and hurried and busied and sometimes challenged into why bother? Why even bother? And I'm afraid, I hate to admit, but I had that attitude about recovery for years because I'd failed so many times that there wasn't even a point to it anymore in my eyes. Bottom of page 83 and mid page 110. Sufficiency isn't an amount at all. It's an experience, a context we generate, a declaration, a knowing that there is enough and that we are enough. I really like that, the mindset of sufficiency. I may not be perfect in program. I may not apply any of this. I may do all that. But I'm working at it, and that's enough. And my occasional failure is just a sign that I'm actually working, that I'm actually doing something. If I weren't doing anything, I wouldn't have to risk failing at it. but my mistakes and my failures are just proof to me that I am actually taking action. And then the very last, well, next to last sentence in the chapter, top of page 112 or the top of page 85, about creating a jar to keep gratitude notes in. I thought that was I've heard of a God box, but I hadn't heard of a gratitude jar. And I kind of like that. Like just to make sure that you put one gratitude in this jar every day for whatever happened. And then in 6 months, go back and look at what's in there. It's just the same concept as a God, God box or a God jar. I like that notion. Because it's proof positive of everything that can go right for me, that I had something to be grateful for that day. So I really liked that. It was kind of a neat way of looking at it. Okay, 4 minutes to